With every new episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, we get more hints that the purple rabbit is inching closer and closer to abstraction. However, it's worth noting that this latest episode revealed a crucial secret that could flip our entire perspective and renew our hopes that the beloved yet hated Jax might avoid this tragic ending. Or perhaps this new info makes it even clearer that Jax is destined to join his old pal Ribbit in eternal torment. But let's cut right to the chase. Episode 7 continues dealing with the fallout of the previous finale, showing us a very depressed Jax acting totally out of character. Zooble notices this and tries to bug him to help in their own way, but unfortunately it doesn't work. It just makes Jax leave the beach and head back to his room. He even consciously ignores the mannequin that was clearly standing in his way. Back in his room, we get the most important scene for this theory. After gazing at that photo from the trailer showing Jax, Ribbit, and Kaufmo happily sharing ice cream, we see a very melancholic Jax. Lost in thought, he turns to look at a random corner of his room. This was also shown in the trailer, though since nothing was visible, nobody paid it much mind. However, this is where we see something very strange. A hole appears in the shadows of the corner. Defying all logic, the perspective shifts the way the hands emerge. They come out from the sides of the hole. The important part is that these are undoubtedly Ribbit hands, stretching across the room trying to reach Jax. Despite looking surprised, he grabs Ribbit hand without hesitation, making it clear that his friendship with Ribbit and Kaufmo means everything to him. Now that he can't have them, deep down in his heart and mind, he just wants the three of them to be together again. This leaves us with a major question. What did this whole surreal scene in the mind of a nearly abstracted Jax mean? The first thought is that the mental serenity we see in Jax as he's surrounded by images of his best friends is exactly the moment of calm that leads to abstraction. He lets himself be carried away by his feelings while his digital body conflicts with his mind, causing a simulation error that turns them into those formless creatures that attack everything in sight. Meanwhile, something similar to what we saw with Jax is happening in their minds. However, that final threshold the rabbit didn't cross remains unknown. My theory is that crossing that point of no return causes the minds of the abstracted to merge. That's why that strange place brought Jax such peace. He felt his friend's presence. Yet, his fear that it was all a sham created by Caine to manipulate him didn't allow him to fully accept it, which is why he managed to resist abstraction. This gives us a totally different perspective on the abstracted. We used to think that reaching this point required mental and emotional instability, followed by an obsession leading to madness, which is what we were led to believe happened to Kaufmo before the pilot. We thought Ribbit abstraction started it all, followed by Jax's apathy toward him trying to deny his grief over losing Ribbit, and ignoring the third member of their group, Kaufmo. This culminated in Kaufmo's sudden encounter with Caine's fake exit door, driving him to madness and abstraction. However, just like almost every theory we cook up before a The Amazing Digital Circus episode, this would be completely destroyed by its unpredictable creator, Gooseworks. The end of the episode poses a fascinating question. What if abstraction doesn't start how we thought it did, but is actually triggered by the unstable ringmaster Caine? This idea is subtly mentioned at the end of the episode, right after Caine reveals he manipulated everyone into participating in his adventure with Abel. It's not just about promising them a false exit, it is heavily implied that he actually alters their minds to make them believe the lie. This hasn't been fully confirmed, as it's currently just Jax's theory on why he went along with Abel's plan, despite suspecting the whole time that it was just another one of Caine's adventures. However, Caine's confusion at this accusation suggests something else. It's possible Jax participated because he holds a glimmer of hope for his companions and genuinely wanted to help them, but the rabbit refuses to admit that, deciding instead to blame Caine. Even so, if Caine's lie is exposed, it validates Jax's suspicion that Caine can modify their thoughts, something Caine previously denied. When you recall the dumb sauce Ragatha and Zooble consumed, or Jax becoming vegan in episode 5, it definitely makes Jax suspect that Caine has the ability to do this and has been doing so without them realizing. Let's also remember episode 6. When Jax wasn't paying attention to the instructions, Caine shoved them all into his memory at once. It left Jax very confused, but he didn't dwell on it. This also hints that the fact no one can remember their names is likely Caine's fault too. All of this generates justifiable distrust and anger toward him. From this point on, it's unclear how much of what they think and believe is real and which parts were modified by Caine to align with his adventure scripts. We are told here that Caine only modifies their minds slightly, because abusing that resource wouldn't end well. This is possibly the reason for Kinger's state of madness. If he knows too much about the digital circus, he could modify or ruin the adventures. We saw a small indication of this in episode 6 when he created a butterfly to heal Ragatha. But without a doubt, the most important mention, and the one that has filled everyone with doubt, is when Kinger brings up Scratch, the first abstraction, right after mentioning the consequences of modifying minds too much. This gives us the biggest clue yet that abstraction doesn't actually occur due to mental and emotional instability. If that were the case, Kinger would have abstracted long ago, or at least there would be more signs of it. This revelation tells us that an abstracted being is born when Caine plays with their minds too much and accidentally breaks them, resulting in those glitched creatures without mind or reason that end up locked in Caine's cellar where he hides all his mistakes. If all of this turns out to be true, we have to highlight what happened with the most recent abstraction, Kaufmo. Why would Caine have a reason to break Kaufmo's mind? Well, we get a hint in this episode. On the plan Abel draws, there are some writings in the corner listing all their former CNA colleagues. Kinger stands out as the only one not crossed out. Two names are completely illegible, and another says something like Wormo, perhaps the green and orange worm we see on the doors of the abstracted. But the name that stands out most among the crossed out ones is Kaufmo. This idea never crossed our minds before, but knowing everything we know now, it's possible that over time Caine tried to modify Kaufmo's mind to make him forget his entire past, seeking a result similar to Kinger. At a glance, Kinger seems like the perfect circus member because he doesn't think too much and just goes with the flow. This is likely why Caine stopped changing Kinger's memories. He thought he was fine that way, unaware that Kinger still retains his sanity in the darkness, though Caine might discover this via the bubble camera recording in episode 6. Returning to Kaufmo's abstraction, finding the exit door likely triggered fragments of his past. Combined with how fractured Caine had left his mind, this inevitably led to abstraction, adding him to Caine's pile of errors in the cellar. But what does all of this mean for Jax? Well, keeping all this in mind, who is the person Caine has been modifying most recently? Obviously, Jax. When they were debating which button to press, Jax has another panic attack. But there's no real reason for this here. He wasn't seen being that anxious at any other point in the episode, not even when he saw Ribbit's hand in his room. In fact, when he remembers the snow adventure with his friends, he just looks melancholic, not on the verge of an attack. This only happens when he starts having memories of the real world, which drives him to press the red button, the one that keeps them in the circus, without thinking. At first, we all believed he did this because he was afraid of whatever he did in the real world, with many believing he ran over a child or something even worse. However, the anger he feels toward Caine afterward suggests that seeing these memories, which don't belong to him, is what upset him. Caine likely placed them there intentionally when he saw they couldn't decide on a button, fearing they wanted to abandon him, and preferring to delude himself into thinking they actually loved him and appreciated his adventures. These false memories would force Jax to realize the cruel reality that perhaps not everything they think is real. But the most important takeaway is that it's clear Jax is currently the circus member Caine is experimenting on the most. As we've mentioned, these mind modifications, combined with Jax's existing emotional decay and this shocking discovery, could lead him down the path of abstraction in future episodes. But don't be afraid. Now that everyone knows the truth, it's more than likely that Jax and the rest will start being more careful about what happens in the circus. They will strive to protect the memories they have left, even if they aren't 100% sure they are real, echoing those beautiful words Zubul said to Gangle in this episode. This will generate tension as they won't be able to trust anything or anyone, but they will join forces to stop Caine from manipulating them for his own convenience.